got them on what they call it, e-learning or whatever it is, the home books or whatever they use.
Yeah.
So they're out of school tomorrow. All Greenville County's no school tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah. I just was out of school, but it was planned way ahead of time, so no. Fall break or something, she got out yesterday, and then she's got to work, she's out till Monday, she's gonna go back till Monday.
Wow.
I see that had nothing to do with weather, it was planned way ahead of time. This is the first time I've ever seen them close the school because of rain or snow. I've seen them do it because they said it was gonna snow, and they closed the school and it didn't.
Yeah, I know. I know. That never happened when I was in school. And that was when they had high school students driving the buses. I'll tell you what, we may skip the song tonight. We don't have enough to sing. All right, I think Sean is putting us live here pretty quickly. No, he can do it online.
Oh.
He has TeamViewer, so he can.
Oh, he can be the ghost in the technology.
Yes, he can. It is awesome.
Okay, what happened to everybody? I'm wondering if lightning is going to strike the church now because everybody's gone.
Some have been on vacation. They just got back this afternoon from Florida.
Okay.
Some are out because they're sick.
Enjoying a baby.
Yeah, and so
Where's Andy?
working.
Andy working?
They had to work today. So that's the way it goes. I'm not sure who else is coming. Anybody else coming? We're waiting for Art.
I guess probably the weather's keeping the workers out maybe.
Yeah,
They think they're really bad up there where they are.
Ray is thinking he may have calls tonight. So with the fire department. So we'll see. All right. All right, I think we are ready to start. We'll just go right ahead. Yes.
I heard a voice.
Yes.
I could not discern the form there.
Well, that's what happens when you don't have somebody in the sound booth. Well, once again, tonight we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 8. This has been an amazing passage to me, simply because of looking up the meaning behind the words humble, and prove. Deuteronomy 8, verses 2 and 3. So, and thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldst keep his commandments or no. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. So the word humble is so interesting because it means to force you, to put you in a position where you have nowhere to turn, to force you to look to God. That's the meaning of humble there. Prove has the idea of putting you in a situation that will reveal your heart, or at least allow you the opportunity to reveal your heart. So still looking at conflict. Probably this will be the last message on conflict. But conflicts, one of the great problems about conflicts is they turn us inward. Pain tends to focus us on ourselves, and it leads to reacting to the pain, complaining, blaming, and sometimes arguing. So I was, in thinking about conflicts, suddenly it's like the whole Bible is filled with conflicts. Wherever you turn, Abraham and Lot, there's conflict there. So many, Jacob and Esau, so many. But in particular, I thought of Job. And when I'm using conflict in the very broadest sense here, and that's anything that we don't expect, that kind of takes control of our life. So when you look at Job, suddenly all these robbers come in and take his flocks. They're gone, just like that. We've had missionaries, one missionary in particular, in which he was scammed thousands of dollars. And how devastating that is, and how that suddenly just dominates your life. And so that's a conflict. Then he lost his children to the tornado that took down the house. We're involved in it right now, hurricane coming in. And suddenly the schools are out. They've already canceled school. They're going e-learning tomorrow, so because they're calling for rain. How interesting. Yeah, they'll be on e-learning. So,
COVID protocol, I guess.
yeah, they'll go to that. But, nature can take control and wreak havoc. Greenville, they had power outages in downtown Greenville, trees down in downtown Greenville this morning. And suddenly, well, you know what happens? I mean, power goes out. Suddenly, there's all kinds of issues there. Then there was disease that came upon Job, and just the pain and the loss of physical ability, and that certainly dominated his thoughts. Then there was conflict with the society that he lived in. When you read the book, Job says, "I took care of the orphans. I fed the widows. I didn't wrong anyone. He would be a model citizen, someone that you wanted in your society." And suddenly he's abandoned by all those that he had helped. And his wife, after the disease there, even his wife was so discouraged, she says she saw no hope. Just go ahead and curse God and die, she said. And so she'd come to a place of utter hopelessness. And then his friends show up. Eventually he says, "Miserable comforters you are." And there's all these false accusations that they're bringing against him. And in it all, Job is questioning the Lord. He says, "Where are you, God? Why won't you speak to me?" So he's asking why. And many times in conflict, that's what we do. We say, why? What have I done? How can I escape this? Lord, where are you? And Job was doing that. Now, Job never accused God, and indeed, he committed himself to God. It's one, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And he says, I know that in my flesh I will see my Redeemer. So he never questions God or turns away from God, even though he did ask why. But as you read the book of Job, it's like chapter after chapter of examination. So one of the things that happens in conflict is we're asking why, and here, because of his friends, there is a very thorough self-examination of his life. His friends forced him to defend his life and examine himself. And when it was all said and done, Job basically, he maintained, I have a clear conscience. And so he came out fine with that. But he never got an answer as to why. In it all, he kept looking for that why. Where are you, God? Why won't you speak to me? Oh, that he would show up and talk to me, that I could present my case that this shouldn't happen. We're still talking about conflict tonight. But with Job, we're allowed behind the scenes. And what happened there was, of course, Satan questioned Job's motive. Well, he only serves you because you do good to him. And so it was a question of Job's heart toward God. And that's a good question. Why do we claim Christ? Why do we do what we do as Christians? Satan apparently is watching. The dark forces are watching. The angels are watching, and certainly the Lord is watching. But here in Deuteronomy 8:2-3, that to prove you, to bring you to a place where your heart is revealed, or to humble you, to bring you to a place where you're forced to look to and to depend on God. So the challenge in conflict is to self-examine. That's something the Israelites never did. Now, Job had help on the self-examination part. He had a lot of help there. And we don't like help like that. But sometimes God sends it. So, the question there is, when we come into conflict, we need to ask, is there something in my life that I need to confess and repent of? And that's kind of looking at our life from a negative aspect. What are my goals, or what are my attitudes? Is there pride there, or is there fear there? It's interesting in Job and talking to his friends, he says, the things that I feared came upon me. That's an interesting verse. It's like his fears almost directed Satan as to what he should do. He feared for his kids. He lost his kids. The wealth and things of this nature, he was concerned about. And it seems like Satan attacked in those areas. Is there anger? And what is my response? What is my response to God, and what is my response to others in this conflict? Now, this is Israel in the Exodus. Their goal, their attitudes, their pride, their fear, their anger, all these things popped up in the conflicts that they experienced there, whether it was with the circumstances of the waters, or the lack of food, or Moses, or the snakes, or the way was hard, or the enemies. There were all these things happening to them. And they were always blaming Moses. Why did you bring us out here to kill us? There's no food to eat. Are we going to slaughter all the animals? And we wish we had leeks and melons. And just constantly complaining and blaming Moses, but really they were blaming God. And by blaming others and questioning their motives, and that's, when we blame others, we're generally saying they have a bad motive. And so that, they never considered that God was revealing their hearts of unbelief. Remember, we get to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, and there the Lord says of that generation that died in the wilderness, they could not enter in because of unbelief. So they never really examined their own heart and where they stood in relation to God. So this is a great challenge of conflicts, that we don't even consider that our Savior really does have a purpose in these things. We simply blame others. We feel like, I'm not to blame. I haven't done anything wrong. Everything I've done is right. I'm just a victim here. And there's never the thought that maybe I'm the one who needs to change. And when it comes to Job, he was righteous. He was. It may be that that we are blameless. And have you ever known anybody who just wound up having to move because their neighbor was so bad? No matter what you did, you couldn't get along with your neighbor. It happens. I know somebody that did that. It was just terrible. And there seemed to be no resolution. And they wound up having to move. In the wilderness, Israel went from one conflict to the next, and they never grew. They never grew in their relationship with God. They never grew in their trust to God. They never became a godly nation, a disciplined nation. They never did. And I think that's something interesting to learn about this whole issue of conflict, and that a wrong response to conflict will generally result in more conflict. It'll just roll right on down, and we'll have more conflict than we had before. And that's what we see in Israel. Going through the wilderness, they went from one conflict to the next conflict to the next conflict, and they never changed. So, when we blame others, then we're saying God really is not involved, and that I don't need to make any changes. And the result is God brings more conflict. We'll try to protect ourselves, and many times that'll lead to isolation and further reaction from the people around us, and the conflicts multiply. Caden's message on pride. God resists the proud. And the question is, how does he do that? Well, obviously through circumstances. He can do that through circumstances. But mostly he does it through other people. That's who turns against us. And he uses even the lost and the ungodly. When you stop and you think about it, Joel in the Old Testament, that was his great question to God. He was looking at Assyria coming down and taking the 10 tribes captive. That's what God had said, that he's going to use the Assyrians to judge the northern kingdom. And Joel is saying, wait a second, God, they are such a wicked people. They're more wicked than we are. How can you do that? And God said, basically, you deserve judgment. You don't worry about them. I'll deal with them later. And he did. But he did use them to work in the northern kingdom's life. Well, I was thinking about Job. Then I got to thinking about Joseph. Once again, so many. David, the conflicts that he had with Saul, with his children, Eli and the people and his sons. You just go through the Old Testament, and there's just conflicts. Isaiah, as he came to the end of his ministry, he was thrown into the pit, and the people turned against him. So you find conflicts throughout the thing. Joseph stands out because if there was someone who was innocent, an innocent victim, it was Joseph. The conflict with his brothers, conflict with Potiphar's wife, just horrible, horrible conflicts. But the interesting thing about Joseph is there's nowhere in there do you find him blaming the others. And that's so strange. He never blames them. And you don't see a spirit of unforgiveness in him at all. And you certainly don't see any vengefulness in it. Even at the end of Genesis, his brothers are still scared that he's going to take vengeance. But there's none of that in Joseph. So it's really interesting. Instead, what you see in Joseph is humility and service to others, and actually he works for others' success, and that's an amazing thing. In that sense, he is so Christ-like. And that Christ, he humbled himself and became obedient even to death, the death of the cross. But he did it in order that we might be saved, that we might be successful spiritually. And it seemed like that was the same spirit that was in Joseph. And that's a very interesting characteristic. There was no self-serving motive to enrich himself or to satisfy his own needs. It just wasn't there. You don't find it in Joseph. He was concerned about his dad. So why did he bring an evil report of his brothers? Why did his dad send him out? Because Joseph was interested in the prosperity of the family, the prosperity of his dad. When he get to Potiphar's house, suddenly, he rises up through the ranks there, and suddenly Potiphar, he has no idea what's going on as far as the management of his household. All he knows is what's set before him as far as his meal goes, and he's getting richer and richer day by day. Why? Because Joseph is watching for his success, seeking to succeed him. Potiphar's wife tempts him, but he's not trying to satisfy himself. He's protecting her. He's protecting Potiphar. He winds up in the prison house, and once again, suddenly the keeper of the prison, he doesn't know what's going on. It's all in Joseph's hands, and he's prospering. Why? Because Joseph is making him prosper. So it's totally unusual characteristic. The same thing happened as far as Pharaoh is concerned. He made him prime minister. And before it's all said and done, Pharaoh owns everything. Everything. And so he prospered Pharaoh. Then when he gets his family down there, he gets a job for his brothers. He says, when we go into Pharaoh, tell him that you're a herdsman. That's an abomination, and I'll get you the best land in Egypt. And Pharaoh says, you can keep my herds too. And so he got their job. He was concerned about the prosperity of the brothers who'd done him so much wrong. And he took care of them. That is so unusual. I guess I have a little bit of an idea about Walmart. When Sam Walton was running Walmart, he cared about his employees and he cared about his vendors. So if you got on with Walmart, he was watching for your success. And so many stories of just cashiers and truck drivers that basically had a career with Walmart during Sam Walton's time. If you go back and you look, the stock would split. If you just bought a little stock, there were cashiers who retired as millionaires because of how they managed the stock. When Sam Walton died, there were no more stock splits. It quit. Vendors. Walmart wanted Little Debbie to make their store brand. Little Debbie said, we're not interested. And they cut their space in the stores from 8 feet to 4 feet as punishment. It's interesting how that works. Ocean Spray had a contract with them to make their store brand. And Walmart kept pushing. They had to build factories to supply Walmart. And you can imagine that. And they kept pushing them on the price. And finally they said, we can't make any money at that price. Walmart didn't care. They weren't worried about them being successful. All they were worried about is their success. Joseph was so unusual in that aspect that he sought to make the people around him successful, even when they when they did wrong to him, even because of the conflicts. His responses were so different. And God blessed him. So how could he do it? And it's interesting, in that final conflict with his brothers, you might say, when they came to him and said, and they lied It's interesting they lied to him. You know, our father before he died said, you know, wanted to pass the message that you don't take vengeance on us. Just paraphrasing there. And this is where Joseph says, God meant it for good. You didn't send me here. God meant it for good. And it's interesting that that's only part of what he said. God meant it for good, but then he says to save much people alive as it is today. And so even there, he's not saying God meant it for good for me. He sent me here in order that I could do good to many people and save them alive as it is today. And he told them, you know, don't worry, I'll nourish you and your families. And that's good. So kind of to conclude the series on conflict, Deuteronomy 8, 2 and 3, very good verses. It's interesting that it's in this verse that we have what Jesus quoted to Satan, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. So the context of that is that God brought them to a place where they had no food, nowhere to get food. He brought them to that place where they had to depend on God. And so Jesus is saying the promise of God, that's the key. It's believing God. It's not the circumstances. It's responding to God, that you might see what he's doing. So in conflict, there's some questions we ought to ask. Number one, am I blaming others? When we do that, they may be at fault, but when we blame others, generally that stops any self-examination we might do. We say, well, I'm innocent. There's nothing I've done wrong. It's all their fault, and I don't need to make any changes, and when they change, everything will be fine. Secondly, what does my response reveal about me? My faith, my goals. What does it reveal about my fears? Is there a bitter spirit in me or a vengeful spirit in me? What does my response here reveal about me? If Israel had asked that, the answer would be it revealed absolutely no faith in God despite all the miracles they'd seen. Unbelief. Third, do I only see myself or do I see others and their needs? And that's Joseph. If we only see ourselves, then we don't. Sometimes, if we actually look at it, there may be something in that person's life that we're really not responsible for. It's not our fault, but they're struggling with something which has resulted in how they've treated us. So maybe there's a need there in their life that we just need to see. I think, who is it? How many have run a cash register in a public setting? Just a little bit. It's interesting what you run into when you're dealing with the public. No, it's not?
I didn't understand what you said.
Oh, if you've run a cash register when you're dealing with the public. You have? Yes, you have. Well, you run into some interesting things there. It can be very challenging. I guess down at Bargains they have a sign up, be kinder than you have to be because everybody is fighting a battle that you don't know about. And that's probably true. We don't know what's going on in people's lives. And sometimes their response to us is because of that other battle they're facing. Have you ever just asked somebody, are you okay?
Yes.
And had them just suddenly pour their heart out to you?
Yes.
And you had no idea. I've had that from a fellow vendor. I really didn't know him. All I knew is he was another vendor. you're doing okay, and suddenly I'm unloaded on. And, people say, well, it won't do any good. So we can pray about it. If you believe in prayer, it can do a lot of good to share that. And so sometimes that's a question when we get in conflict. Do I only see what I'm dealing with or what's happening to me? Or do I see that there's some other things going on and that they have needs that are not obvious? And finally, the question is, do I really believe that Jesus is in control? Do I really believe that? Voice of the Martyrs. Biak, that was here last Wednesday night. What did he say? That there had been like 360-something churches that had been burned, and over 7,000 Christians killed in India.
7,000 homes destroyed.
That was it, 7,000 homes destroyed. When you get into that kind of conflict, when you look at Africa, I guess in the last Voice of the Martyrs, I was reading about a family that had been in the refugee camp for like 10 years. And there's really no hope of ever getting out. I mean, the militants are still, I think that was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's like, wow, talk about conflict. Something trying your faith. And yet here are Christians in these situations, and they're still standing for Christ. They're not denying Christ. They're still believing. They're still trusting, and they're still standing. They obviously believe that God is still in control, that God is there, and that He is working. So conflict is something, back to Job. Job says, man is born unto trouble. Can you finish that? As the sparks fly upward. Sparks fly up naturally. That's the way the world is. There's heat there, the sparks go up. And so conflict will come to every one of us. Sometimes it's very close within our family. Sometimes it's with strangers. Road rage. Have you seen road rage? I've seen a little road rage along the way, and it's like, what is this accomplishing? Nothing good. But conflict will come. Sometimes it's not something that we sought or brought about. It just came. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Do you believe God is in control? Does everything really work to our good according to Romans 8? Is that really true?
If we love God, yes.
Yeah?
Clause there.
There's a clause there. Yes, there is. If we love God. But that's what I'm saying. If we love God, we trust God. Hopefully. That should be. And there's a purpose in it. It's to conform us to Christ. And as we conform to Christ, like Joseph, He can use us in the lives of others. And that's the exciting part, that He can use us in the lives of others. And many times how we respond to conflict will determine how easily and how often He can use us in the lives of others. So it's a challenge. Well, conflict. You'll have it. I'll have it. May it conform us to Christ. All right, thoughts, comments? Missing all my commenting people tonight. No? All right. I'm going to cut off. Jeremy, you want to cut off Facebook, and we'll give some prayer requests and kind of catch up on where everybody is.